throw away that food waste, make it compost. What to do with that apple core, be compost. Eat it and just put it where it all goes. Back to earth and nutrient rich compost. Don't throw away that food waste, make it compost.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining today for this important conversation about composting and what it is and why it matters for the environment and how you all can get involved. I'm Jessie Rothfleisch. I work as the Climate Action Coordinator for Adamah, New York. Today's webinar is one of many that Adamah, New York is holding regularly as part of our climate action programming. So over the next hour-ish, we'll explore the how-to of composting and learn how you can start or enhance your composting journey in a way that reflects environmental responsibility and Jewish wisdom. We will hear from Natalia Sucre, Program Manager for Compost Education and Outreach at Big Reuse, which is a New York City-based organization whose mission is to fight climate change through community-based zero waste initiatives. And as of April 1st of this year, composting is required in all 5 boroughs of New York City. So that is a great step in the right direction. And before we get into the details of composting and compliance with Natalia, I want to frame our conversation by quickly talking about why composting is important through the lens of Jewish tradition. So in Judaism, we're called to be Shomrei Adamah, guardians of the earth, and to practice the value of Bal Tashit, the prohibition against needless destruction or waste. This mitzvah teaches us to avoid wasting resources, whether that's food, clothing, or energy. Composting is a practical and meaningful way to honor this value in our everyday lives and to actively participate in the sustainability of our earth by turning waste into something regenerative and purposeful. Instead of sending food scraps and yard waste to landfills, composting transforms them into rich soil that nourishes plants and restores our ecosystems. We can also think about tikkun olam, the responsibility to repair the world. In the face of the climate crisis, composting might seem small, but it can have a powerful impact on our carbon footprint, and it contributes to a more sustainable world. And finally, I just want to add that Adamah supports Jewish institutions to take on various kinds of climate action work that aligns with these values beyond just composting. So if you're not already a member, consider joining Adamah's Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition to start taking climate action in your community. Joining the Climate Leadership Coalition is free, and it gives your organization access to grants, zero-interest loans for climate action projects, informational resource guides, consultation and coaching with Adamah staff, and more webinars and workshops like this. So I will add the link in the chat, which you can visit for more information on the coalition and to become a member today. And I will pass it off to Natalia to get us started on composting.
Thank you so much to Adamah for inviting us. This is really a wonderful opportunity. It's wonderful to see so many people here. This webinar is going to focus more on the 5 boroughs, but a lot of it can be transferred to other areas in New York State. As Jessica mentioned, I am from Big Reuse, and just to say a few words about Big Reuse, our focus is zero waste initiatives and community-based actions, and we do a whole range of things. And the focus is taking things out of landfill, both food scraps, food waste, and any kind of waste. So in a sense, we mimic the compost cycle and try to bolster the circular economy. That's our mission. So today, what I'm going to go over first is why compost. Jessica already put it in a very eloquent way, I think, but we'll go over that a little bit more and then go into the 2 ways that you can compost now, either through municipal composting, through the organics collection program that is now universal in all 5 boroughs, and has also taken off in other areas of the state. And then also focusing on how to do community compost and home composting, and how institutions can foster that for their members. We're going to start with why compost just very quickly. And I think that this definition, close to the definition that Jessica gave, already encompasses why compost, right? Compost is a regenerative substance. It isn't just a fertilizer. Often it can be seen as just that, but it is an essential microbial source, a probiotic for the land beneath our feet. That comes from the Compost Story by Kiss the Ground, which I highly recommend. It's a very short film, but it's very effective. It's a very short video. So compost basically has superpowers, and they are superpowers that we're very much in need of right now. So first of all, it reduces waste. This is essential at this moment when 50% of city garbage could be composted. That's nationwide. So we actually only compost 5% of the food waste that we could compost right now in the whole country. So that's big, number one. Number two, it enhances soil, and this is really crucial at a moment when we are losing soil across the world and in the United States. So compost has the ability to add, to make good soil. It takes nature 1,800 years to make soil, to make a handful of soil, whereas with compost, we can do it in a year. So this is really, really magical. Of course, it increases fertility. It is a fertilizer in that sense. But all of the other aspects of enhancing soil are important too. It's very important for mitigating stormwater, for filtering, even for filtering pollutants, for remediating lead soils in cities, all of this. And then when we're talking about community composting, and even I would argue in some way curbside composting, because it requires so much of neighbors, it grows community. It grows community in many basic ways. It creates more green jobs than traditional industrial composting does and waste management does. It creates, because it functions as a closed loop where your food scraps come back to you in the form of compost that's used, that the city gives away, that community organizations like Big Reuse use for tree stewardship and for community gardens. It creates community resilience and community bonding. And then finally, and these of course are not in rank order, it protects the climate. It reduces methane gases, which are 80 times more harmful than carbon dioxide by keeping them out of landfill. And even in the case of anaerobic digestion, which is one of the ways that food scraps are recycled in New York City, it does take that methane out of the materials, so that though some of that does go to landfill capping, it doesn't have the same degree of methane. So this is why we compost. This is also why we compost. And a word about saying compost in that way. We often, it's just part of our usage to say, I'm composting when I'm dropping off scraps or when I'm participating in a curbside. Of course, composting involves a whole lot more than that. Anyone who has set up composting or volunteered for composting knows the labor involved. But I think that it's important just to acknowledge that labor, especially now because often it is volunteer labor. But quality of life is also very important. And there are a lot of fears about a lot of associations of compost with rats, compost with pests and general ickiness. But really, compost does the opposite of what you see in this picture. It contains the food waste so that it takes it out of the trash so that rats cannot get to it. So the issue with curbside composting right now, the data has shown in the last year that only 3.7% of what we could be capturing of the food waste that is available for composting in New York City is being captured. So it's less than 5% is currently actually being processed as compost. The rest is still going to landfill. And this has been an issue in New York City with curbside all along. Curbside in New York City began in 2013 as a pilot program. It expanded. It started out in just a few neighborhoods. It expanded. As it expanded, it captured less and less. So this is a problem, and it is a problem that has to do with behavioral change. This is why it's so important that institutions take a role as well. Institutions have the power to really model this behavioral change and to support it in so many different ways. Also, even though the capture is so low, there are examples in other cities, and we'll look at that at the end, where composting, the organics collection, has been quite successful. So there is hope, and also it just takes time. I mean, in some ways we've had almost 12 years of it, but not in consistent enough a way. So the hope is that now we will be getting there. So going into curbside organics collection 101, I'm just going to go over how the program works. And again, apologies if you are not in New York City, but a lot of this applies to compost drop-off in general anyway. So first of all, for institutions, the curbside organics collection is not available to private schools, to nonprofits, or to houses of worship. And you're not required to separate organics from trash. However, many organizations find ways to do it by hiring private carriers. Big Reuse sometimes does this kind of hauling for nonprofits. We are in a somewhat precarious moment and a moment of change. So we're not certain that we will be doing that kind of hauling. We will know if we get funding from City Council at the end of this month. And then we will figure out, if we do get it, how we're going to use it. But just keep in mind that we could be a resource for hauling scraps in your nonprofit or your institution. There are several other options. In New York City, every borough has their own micro hauler organization that is bike power. These organizations are small but very powerful. They're often bike powered. BK Rot in Brooklyn, for example, is also a youth development program. So these are always options you can reach out to. You can also reach out to these organizations for consultations. If they can't do it, they can find someone who can. Another source of good information on private haulers is the lists that are linked here that have been developed by the city through local law 199, which is creating commercial waste zones, 20 commercial waste zones around the city that will allow for lower pricing in hauling and more equitable transfer of waste. So this is slowly rolling out, but the information is there for those. And New York State has also provides a list of vetted waste haulers for those of you who are out of state. So other things that institutions can do, schools particularly can have a lot of resources that they can reach out to, even if you're not doing, if you don't have the funds to do private hauling and you're not on a route for DSNY or you're a private school, you can still participate in education. There's a wonderful organization called Cafeteria Culture, which works on a range of issues connected to waste, from microplastics to food waste. What you see here is a project of walking students through planning their meals in such a way that less food is wasted. And the results have been quite amazing. It's a very simple toolkit, but has great results. And of course, there's also just promoting promoting curbside by providing information, providing education. There is still a lot of confusion about how to use the brown bins and whether it's all effective. So just want to note that the mandatory compost came from the Zero Waste Act in 2023, which was a legislation that many community composting organizations had been fighting for. It was led by city council members very involved in community composting, like Sandy Nurse and Shana Hanif. So that's where it came from. You will have heard that it's now mandatory and that fees were going to be enforced on April 1st. They were enforced for all of 18 days. On April 18th, Mayor Adams paused the fees. And this has been very controversial. According to DSNY, they had begun to collect an astonishing amount in those weeks. Other data shows, for example, in Seattle, when fees were enforced, the collection jumped by 45%. At the same time, and I know this from personal experience, I was doing workshops around in libraries on this and encountering a lot of pushback on the fines, a lot of sense that the city just wanted money, that why were they, targeting people this way, especially among small landlords. So this is where we stand now. It will become mandatory again in a slower fashion, and there is time to do more education. So that is the focus now. So what does compliance look like with curbside? there was a lot of focus on the bin, whether you have a bin or you don't have a bin. What if your bin is empty because you compost at home or anything like this? It's not about the bin. It's not about having the bin. What inspectors actually do is look at the trash. They actually open your trash and see if food scraps are mixed in. So that's the test. Many people are in a situation where either as a landlord, they can't make their tenants comply, or as a tenant, they're not provided, especially in high-rise buildings, with the tools to comply. For the first situation, DSNY and hopefully other community organizations going into the summer, like Big Reuse, have outreach events. They can be in person, where that can help bring in tenants. And in the other situation, there is a mechanism where you can tell on your landlord that composting is not happening in your building. This is seen as deputizing New Yorkers to really make compost happen. I haven't been able to look at the data, but I'm not sure how popular it's been. It's also been seen as snitching. So setting up the bins. This is something that was different from previous curbside programs. You can just use any bin. You don't have to get the brown bin. The DSNY says the bin can be 21 to 55 gallons. 55 gallons of food waste is very, very, very heavy. At my community garden, we've worked with our garage, and they've told us in no uncertain terms that even 32 gallons is too much, that it's better to not fill these up all the way, and 21 gallons is really the preferred size. And at this point, so the bins have to have a latch, a lid, a heavy lid, and those kinds of bins are in fact very expensive. So at this point, the city's bin is the most affordable bin, and you can order them online, and they're also available at Home Depot. In terms of lining the bin, you can line the bin. You want to use a plastic bag. You can use a biodegradable bag or a brown paper bag. The plastic bags and the biodegradable bags are fished out by very expensive machinery and sent to landfill. It was decided, but that was by the city, that this would make it easier for people to comply, because it is neater. However, it is possible to not use a bag at all or use the paper bag. If you don't use a bag, you can always put in a little shredded cardboard or baking soda to make it all neater. Setting up the bins, it's important to note that buildings are required to place food scrap bins in an area that is accessible to residents. This is the law, hence the snitching mechanism. And best practices are to have as much signage as possible. There have been studies that show that signage, even though signage is often ignored, just having it really improves participation. DSNY has a site linked here that has the flyers in all different languages. So the do's and don'ts of what you can drop off. This is the heart of it. This is what one of the greatest difficulties. So the way it's set up, basically the rule is anything that was recently living can be dropped off. So anything that is organic. That means all of the things that you see here, even what's called post-consumer food. So your dinner leftovers, this is not what you can normally compost yourself in your backyard or in a community composting system, or that you can feed directly to worms for vermicomposting. But in the city system, the industrial composting is large enough that you can drop these off. It seems what you cannot drop off are things that are inorganic, with the exception, they say no cardboard here too, clean paper and no cardboard. And that's not because it can't be composted, it can, but it actually works better for it to be recycled. Paper recycling in New York, it works very well. So it's better to only put in food soiled paper products. And it may be a surprise that it may seem like a no-brainer. Of course, you don't put in metal, glass, plastic, but it happens a lot. So that's just something to keep in mind. Some best practices. The next issue is how to store your scraps at home. You can use it's also important to do a little prep on your scraps, just basic things like taking off the food stickers, the rubber bands. You can also chop your scraps a little bit, which actually can become an interesting ritual. Chopping is a part of community composting that people love. And what that does is it gives you more room in whatever container you're using to store your scraps. And it is better to use a reusable container rather than a plastic bag in many ways, not only because you're not using plastic or biodegradable bags, which are treated as plastic and sent to landfill, but also it actually just contains the scraps better and is easier to manage. You can keep your scraps in the fridge, or if you can also, if you just have scraps that are veggie and vegetables and fruit, you can keep those on the counter as well and keep down any smells with shredded cardboard. So here are some examples of reusable containers. The first one is one that you can buy. I think it's at $24. It's actually a really great system. And you'll see that it has little holes on top of the lid. You can mimic that. That actually helps. If you have your own container, either a glass jar or plastic yogurt container, if you put in some holes, it will keep the food scraps aerobic, that is, keep oxygen in, and that's what keeps it from smelling. Actually, it seems counterintuitive, but that's how it works. In terms of the biodegradable bags, this is just a suggestion, but really they are treated in the system as the same as plastic bags. So, and plastic, even the biodegradable plastic, is really a huge issue in composting. So it's easiest really to save your money and avoid them. This is an image of contamination. This is in a community, in a public food scrap drop-off. You see all those bottles there. Those are going to get covered by food scraps, and then it's going to be a whole ordeal to fish the bottles out. This is the kind of thing that happens all of the time with the brown bins, since they're out on the sidewalk. It's hard. I have heard no solution to this problem because you do have to put them out, and you can't be checking them all the time. But in terms of just being mindful yourself of not putting any trash in and of taking trash out if you see it at the right moment and it's possible. So just to explain where all of the city curbside collection is going. Right now, or at least it's unclear what the percentages are. Part of it goes to Newtown Creek. At one point, it was 80%, and it seems that it's less than that now. Going to Newtown Creek means that it goes through a different process. It does not produce compost. It produces biogas, which in the best case scenarios is captured in a gas to grid system, which has had some problems over the years. But that is the idea. And apparently it is now functioning. And then the biosolids, as I said before, are used for landfill capping. And that sounds bad because it sounds like landfill. But again, as I said, the methane has already been sucked out of the material. And also, it is material that is highly contaminated with forever chemicals because it has been mixed. The food scraps, it goes through a process called co-digestion, and it has been mixed with sewage. That's what the anaerobic digestion means. So really using it as landfill capping and not as fertilizer or for agricultural purposes or even landscaping purposes is the best use. So I, for one, am happy to hear that. The other 20% is made into compost at Fresh Kills, a composting facility, and that compost is returned to the city. And apparently they have been making so much that they just opened a new giveaway spot in Astoria. One more thing about curbside is that there is a lot of problems with the collection sometimes. The collection day is the same as your recycling day. And if your bin is not picked up, you can call. It's a good practice to have your DSNY garage number. You can call and they sometimes will come back and pick it up, but it's also good to put in the complaint through 311 because people can look at that data and later do studies with it. So I would say I just want to point out two reasons to hope in terms of curbside. One is that there are many buildings where, and these are rental buildings and co-op buildings, where people have gotten together to make the curbside work. This is an example of a building in Brooklyn. This super has 100 units and started with just 2 brown bins, now has about 12, and has really made it work and is helping others to do the same. And also going back to the cases of San Francisco and Seattle, which were the first cities to start a curbside composting. They have very high rates and have had high rates at different points. Seattle is at 60% now, 60% capture rate. Compare that to New York City, which is below 5% right now. But what's interesting about looking at these cases is that it took them time to get there. And New York City still has time. So these are some resources for curbside. The first one is DSNY, but I also want to point to the solid waste advisory boards, the SWABs. Both Manhattan and Brooklyn have excellent resources on their page, on their websites on curbside. So moving on quickly to Community Composting 101. This is going to be a little bit shorter. I just want to point out a few systems that you could use. You could, if you have space, any kind of space in your building or your home, you could do a small in-vessel system. You can also do a worm bin. This is especially great for schools. Children get warm worship very quickly. And it's also very easy to make. The steps that you see here are basically it. It's true that with the vermicomposting, it isn't as much capacity in terms of processing food waste. Worms are more finicky about what they'll process. But it's a wonderful learning experience. It's very this picture here on the lawn is a 3-bin system, which is the traditional community garden system for composting that was built by a group that came to a library workshop and said they wanted to do this. This is in a co-op complex in Queens. So we weren't able, because they were private, we were only able to give them technical assistance, but they built this on their own, and they've already started composting. It was quite easy to follow the blueprint and get this done. And finally, Big Reuse has a new composting system out. It's an aluminum 3-bin system. It's larger, it's 4x4, but what's really exciting about this system is that it is definitely rodent proof, and it has a high capacity, and most of all, it's durable. It will last more than 30 years. Right at the moment, Big Reuse is offering these systems and technical assistance around these systems and the installation of these systems to community organizations. Again, we're at a precarious point, so we don't know if we can continue this, but this is a direction that Big Reuse is invested in, because it sort of puts power in the hands of people to process their own food scraps, their own waste on site. And it's a very effective system. So just to note that the community drop-off is different from the food scrap drop-off, the curbside drop-off. With community composting, you won't be able to do everything. Although we may be experimenting with doing more meat and those kinds of products in the aluminum bins. It can be dangerous unless you monitor it very closely. Dangerous in terms of pathogens, but the bins are rat proof, so that's why, and that's why many of these things are not accepted in community composting drop-offs. These are some community composting resources. If you are interested in creating a system in your institutions, big or small, volunteering with Big Reuse is a great option. We have several volunteer options at community operations on Randall's Island, the Urban Farm, Sky Farm in Long Island City, and you can see what the whole process is that way. There's also the Master Composter course. We're not sure that it will be continued, but the manual from many years ago is still really a great guide, and it's still available. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance also has a great guide, and they have really wonderful educational material as well. So I would love to hear questions from you.
And feel free to put questions in the chat too, or just go ahead and share.
Yeah, I have a question about this compostable plastics and I'm here to find out how to make composting at work at my synagogue, where there are a lot of mass food events. They use compostable, supposedly, plates and plastics, and they have bins. And I gather from what you said is that these are not really recycled or turned into compost. So could you clarify that situation? Because we've been pushing for it, and if it's a big waste of time and money,
Right. Of course, of course. So you're giving those compostable ware to the brown bins, to bins that are getting picked
I
up.
assume there's a waste hauler for this. It's a big
A waste hauler,
institution, so I assume that they collect.
right?
I don't think they put it out on the sidewalk.
I see. They're a private hauler.
I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So if it's a private hauler, they're probably going to Newtown Creek, and that material is taken out of the material of the compost of the food scraps and is landfilled. So in a way, it's not that different from regular plastic.
So is it like a total waste to be doing that? Or
It's I wouldn't, it's a semi-waste. What I would suggest, and maybe it's too simple, is that there is kind of where like just plain paper plates, the kind that they give you with pizza, those are completely compostable. That will work. So that's
what about the plastic ware and
the plastic ware, it's ironically, where it can be processed is in the mid-scale processors like Big Reuse and Earth Matter. But if you're using a private carrier, they won't be hauling there. So I would say it is more on the waste side.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
There was a question in the chat about pizza boxes. Should they go in compost or paper recycling?
They are almost always food soiled. So they do go in composting. Yeah. And they do get composted. Yeah.
I have a question.
Huh? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So we're just starting this in our synagogue, and I have kiddishes where it's just us. It's a learning process. Like it almost takes a person standing by the trash. Like I was trying to envision and being kind of a policewoman. I mean, it's sort of like, no, scrape your plate and then put the plate in this bin. That's what it seems to take, right? Yes.
Yes, that's a wonderful point.
It's about scraping. It's like summer camp again. Scrape
Right.
the plate. Okay.
Right. And it can be a great, and signage helps in those cases, but signage does not do the whole.
Right.
It's also a great opportunity to get children involved. They, because if you make them the captains, it's kind of fun for them and for others, and it's educational.
That's interesting. And also, we're at a synagogue where we have an outside caterer, so they're using their plastic. And then we have our in-house events where we're trying very hard to be green. And so it's a confusing, depending on the week and who's sponsored the kiddush, it's a whole other, so it was really enlightening to hear. I'm similar to the previous, the first person who brought this up, that it's a waste of time to pay money for compostable products. Just separate the food scraps and the paper scraps from the plastic. What about paper cups, coffee cups that have that wax inside?
Yeah, if they have the wax, then they're not compostable. Or and I've heard that some are recyclable, but I find it hard to distinguish which those are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what is useful about moving away from the idea of compostables as a solution is that you're sort of forced to look for other solutions. right? And this is maybe a slightly fringe example, but at my community garden, we do events and we try to make it zero waste. So we'll do things like, for cups, we'll use those little glass yogurt containers that are actually pretty light to carry and easy to wash. And so it is more helpful to try to be thinking about those other solutions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, to
go ahead.
continue with the discussion about the plasticware or the so-called compostable plasticware. So that those all should go in recyclable bins?
Yes, they can go in the recyclable bins.
Right.
In,
And
in,
even if the so-called compostable ones that are going to landfill will break down better, you're suggesting that it's not worth it and just get the regular plastic and put it into recyclable.
or find another solution, like see if you can adopt, go back to silverware,
Well, that requires people
or
washing it.
bamboo. Like bamboo is a compostable
Oh,
that
okay, because
is
sometimes
recyclable.
caterers, it's the same synagogue, by the way. Sometimes we do have a caterer that will use bamboo.
That I'm sorry, I forgot to say that. That's a good option. That's an
Oh, okay.
excellent
Thank
option.
you.
Yeah. And I will say about what's compostable and not. It really has more to do with the system than whether it is in fact biodegradable or not. So there is a lot of greenwashing often with courseware, like if you're at a shop or and they say it's compostable, you can't see what the label is from the box, right? You just go on their word. If the label says BPI certified, it means that it is compostable. And if it's going to a mid-scale processing site like Earth Matter, which haulers like Reclaimed Organics in Manhattan, they haul to Earth Matter. So it's all very detailed. That's just how it is. So if you're using those haulers, then you can use the BPI certified compostables.
So in other words, we have to find out the destination.
Yes,
Right.
And
that is
that's
the
going
best thing.
to determine what can or can't be done.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for putting it that way.
And can
yes,
we reach
Amy.
out? Oh, I'm sorry.
I think Amy Meltzer had a question.
I do. And if they're too specific for like everybody here, because I came like really with like a list of questions that I was hoping would get
Okay.
answered. So one you answered, which was, I was kind of curious, like what labeling am I looking for when I'm purchasing compostables? Because I know that PFAS is a whole other issue with our compostables. So you're saying the BPI certification, like if I search for that. So my question, I mean, I'm actually grateful to live in a smaller community that has a very high composting rate, but I am in charge of my staff retreat. I volunteered to be in charge of staff retreat food next week just so I could model composting, but I don't live in New York City. And so I researched, I'm sorry, what are they called? The smart compost bins that are in the city
Yeah.
where you can drop off your compost.
Yeah.
So, does that work? I think
That does-
that's my plan right now. Is like I'm ordering, I don't have access to, we have to still use single-use stuff other than coffee and drinks, right? So my plan was bag up all our stuff and put it in those bins. Is there something I'm missing? And
Absolutely not. If you have easy access to those bins, that's wonderful. And I realized as soon as I started this that I had forgot to refer to the orange bins. That's a great option.
I mean, this is only a group of 35. So obviously, if you're running a kiddish for 500, you might not have people who want to take all your bags, or maybe there's not room in the bins. I haven't even like laid eyes on them yet. But what you're saying is that that's like that's up and running and real.
That is up and running. You know, you have to download an app so that you can open the bins.
Yeah, I got
And
that.
that
Thank
will
you.
also, yes, and that will also often, it's pretty up to date, tell you when the bins are full.
Okay,
So it can
and
give you that information.
I think this is my last question. Beyond the BPI certification, are there any lists for just sort of evaluating the sustainability of various, again, I understand that single-use stuff is not ideal, but when we're stuck with it,
Right.
to evaluate just like the general sustainability of different products, is there any good resource you could direct us to?
The ones that I know are mostly generated through BPI.
Okay.
But that is an excellent question. And I will research it and get it back to the group. But again, it often has to do with the system in which it's being processed. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
All right, I think I'll try to wrap us up just to be mindful of everyone's time. But I think we'll share resources after this. And if you have more questions, you can reach out to me or Natalia. But yeah, thank you all for joining. And I just wanted to give a quick reminder about some upcoming things at Adamah. First, our Climate Action Fund grant and loan programs are accepting applications for our next deadline of November 6th. So you can visit our website to learn more and start planning to apply. Funding is only available to members of the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition, but there's plenty of time to still join and still apply. And we also have a exciting Jewish Day of Service, our Rooted event coming up that Shahar will quickly share about and maybe close us out.
Sure. Thank you, Jesse and Natalia and Big Reuse. I definitely learned a lot, and I encourage all of us to dig deeper into all these materials, and you'll get everything in a follow-up email. So I want to quickly just announce about a special day we're holding on September 21st. A day before Rosh Hashanah Eve and the first day of Climate Week, New York. Adamah is bringing together volunteers, and we're hoping to get over 1,000 volunteers for a day of community service in the great outdoors. We'll be rolling up our sleeves in parks, beaches, nature reserves, and along riverbanks across New York, and giving back to the planet together as a community and in community. And activities will include park cleanups, trash removal, planting, painting fences, garden care, and more for different demographics, for teens, for kids, for adults, etc. We'll be in many places, about 15 different locations in the city, in Westchester, and in Long Island. And on top of the service that we'll provide for the earth, we'll do a joint service for our souls. We'll gather as a community. We'll have music and Jewish environmental educators from the Adamah family and the Tevo family to join us and lead us during that day. So we can drop the link in the chat if you are interested and want to learn more and want to bring your community to join us. Be in touch with us, and we'll also send the link in the follow-up email. It's on our website. We want to bring as many community partners as possible to join us for this special day. So I want to close us by thanking again Big Reuse and Natalia for sharing their knowledge, to Jesse Rotfleisch for organizing this webinar together. And you can schedule a consultation with her or with others in the Adamah staff. We're here to support you. So thank you very much, everyone.